Hello, and welcome to Compassion and Choice's Volunteer Action Network training on local resolutions. Compassion and Choices is the oldest, largest, and most active national organization working to improve care and expand options for the end of life, and we couldn't do this work without you. Your commitment and enthusiasm are the foundation on which success in your state will be built. This training will provide step-by-step information on engaging your local government and working to pass a town, city, or county resolution or proclamation in support of medical aid in dying for terminally ill people who are suffering. The presentation is based on Chapter 4 of the Volunteer Action Network Toolkit, a guide to volunteer advocacy, which focuses on passing local resolutions and is available in the Volunteer Resource Center on the Compassion and Choices website. This valuable training will help you and other like-minded community members advance a local resolution, proclamation, or other public statement of support. The actions we discuss today will help you determine whether a local resolution is the best course of action in your town, city, or county. And if so, it will help you identify strategic partners and a sponsor or sponsors to champion this resolution or proclamation. As we start, let's discuss our objectives. By the end of this training, you'll understand what a local resolution or statement of support is and why passing these resolutions helps the end-of-life options movement. You'll understand how to research whether your city, town, or county is a good candidate for pursuing passage of a local resolution. You'll understand what is involved in getting your local elected officials to champion and pass a statement of support for medical aid in dying. You'll learn some of the nuances about how to talk successfully about medical aid in dying, and you'll be ready to take action to get a local resolution passed in your community, and you'll know how to get started. Medical aid in dying is a winning issue. Your locally elected officials were voted into office to represent the will of their constituents. For this reason, it's important that they understand that medical aid in dying commands long-term, bipartisan majority support among voters nationwide. A 2017 Gallup poll put national support for medical aid in dying at 73%, which is consistent with other recent national and state results, such as this 2016 Lifeway Research online survey that put support for medical aid in dying at 67%. Poll after independent poll has shown that this support is consistent across people of varying regions, ethnicities, faiths, and political affiliations. For more information on the polling and support among various constituent groups, visit the Compassion and Choices Understanding the Issues webpage. So what is a local resolution, and why pass one? Every city or county elected body has a mechanism for local legislators to introduce and pass a public declaration expressing their support for or acknowledgement of a particular position on a matter of public interest. These are usually referred to as resolutions or proclamations. Although medical aid in dying legislation is handled at the state level, state legislators pay close attention to local resolutions when understanding what is important to their constituents, especially when they're considering issues that they perceive to be controversial. A local resolution sends a clear and powerful message of support for medical aid in dying to state legislators. Passing local resolutions is one of the most impactful strategies to lay the groundwork for statewide legislation. Resolutions and other declarations on medical aid in dying have been critical momentum-building strategies in states like California, where shortly after passing multiple local resolutions, the state authorized the End-of-Life Option Act. They can also be enormously important to generate visibility in states where we are building state campaign infrastructure. That said, not all local elected officials will want to take a stand on medical aid in dying. You should be sure that your efforts are directed at the most impactful actions, so it's important to do some preliminary research before pursuing a local resolution. 3 steps can help you determine whether a local resolution in your city, town, or county is a good use of your volunteer time. First, identify your local jurisdiction's elected bodies and become familiar with the process for getting a local resolution passed. This is information that you can generally find by doing an internet search or by contacting the board or council clerk. Second, learn about the elected officials in your jurisdictions. try researching your local officials' websites, speaking with friends or community members who know them, or scheduling informational meetings with officials and, if they have them, with their staffers. Third, make a decision. Once you've completed the preliminary research, partner with the Compassion and Choices campaign manager in your state to determine whether passing a local resolution would be the best use of your time and energy. Now let's talk a little bit more about each of these steps. Identify your local jurisdiction's elected bodies and become familiar with the process for getting a local resolution passed. Depending upon where you live, there may be more than one elected body for you to consider. Most states have at least 2 tiers of local government: counties and municipalities. In some states, counties are divided into townships. Municipalities include several different types of jurisdictions, including cities, towns, boroughs, and villages. The types and natures of these municipalities vary from state to state. Once you've identified your jurisdictions, learning how they're structured and how resolutions are adopted is the next step. You can find the questions on this slide, plus many others that you'll need to have answered in Chapter 4 of the Volunteer Action Network Advocacy Toolkit. For example, does the jurisdiction have any similar resolutions or proclamations on the books? What is the legislative process to pass a statement of support? Will the resolution have to go through a subcommittee before reaching the full body for a vote? And if so, what committee and which members are on it? How many votes are needed for it to pass both the subcommittee and the full council or board? Can the mayor, chair, or president veto the resolution? And is the mayor, chair, or president a voting member of the council or commission? If you don't know or it isn't obvious after an online search, call the elected body's clerk or contact your locally elected official and ask what the options, procedures, and correct terminology are for passing resolutions or proclamations. Next, you'll want to identify and learn more about the elected officials in each jurisdiction. Specifically, you'll want to find their name, their party affiliation or political leanings, their priority issues, their voting record on health-related matters, their local influence, so what is their role on the board or commission, what's their past experience, what are their media mentions, and how is their general standing in the community. And you'll want to know their medical aid in dying credibility. Do they have a personal story? Do they have any related policy experience with the issue, or any other related efforts? And now it's time to make a decision. Once you've collected the information that you need, discuss the details with your Compassion and Choices campaign manager. The two of you can then determine whether any of your jurisdictions are a good option for pursuing a local resolution. Keep in mind that not all jurisdictions are ready for this kind of resolution, as disappointing as that may be. Because we want to make the greatest use of our limited resources, we'll only move forward with efforts where we can realistically expect to succeed. Once you and your Compassion and Choices campaign manager have determined that it does make sense to pursue passage of a local resolution or proclamation, the fun really begins. Here are the tried and true steps to make your vision a reality. First, identify a strategic champion to sponsor your resolution. Second, give your champion solid, fact-based talking points. Third, use the template resolution in our toolkit to customize the resolution. Fourth, be available to explain the issue to undecided and persuadable representatives. Fifth, plan for a great hearing. Sixth, get people to contact their elected officials. And now we'll review each of these steps in a little more detail. Ideally, you'll have an ally on the City Council or County Commission, or maybe even the mayor, who will sponsor the resolution and help you navigate the process and the politics. But keep in mind that the easiest person to convince to sponsor your legislation may not always be the best. Your champion should have a proven and recent record of passing legislation, and if possible, some credibility to speak to this issue, either through a personal experience with a loved one who did or did not die peacefully, or other efforts they've been involved in. And because this issue can be seen as controversial, your champion should not be polarizing, but should be somebody who works well with other members of the council or commission. Give your champion our solid, fact-based talking points. Research has shown us that people have very different reactions to medical aid in dying based on how the issue is presented to them and the words that are used. We have seen that stories are extraordinarily powerful and impactful, but they must be backed up with data, accurate terminology, and compelling talking points to drive the point home. We'll go over some of the facts about medical aid in dying and the language we know works to help others understand what it is and why it's such an important option. Make sure you understand it and that you share it with your legislative champion so that they can be maximally persuasive in their conversations with colleagues. Next, you'll want to draft your resolution. Customize the template resolution from the Passing a Local Resolution toolkit and make it available to your champion. But keep in mind that the precise wording of the resolution is flexible. Not every local council or other body is ready to support full authorization, but they may be willing to support something less ambitious that is a step along the path toward full end-of-life options. Go with what works, and remember, the byword of politics is compromise. So for example, the city of West Hollywood, the first in California to weigh in on this issue with a local resolution, was not yet ready to call for full authorization of medical aid in dying, but they were ready to call on local district attorneys in Los Angeles County to refrain from prosecuting any doctor or family member involved with medical aid in dying. Passage of this customized resolution still demonstrated local support for the issue. If you would like to customize a resolution, be sure to consult with your volunteer manager about any proposed changes, as they may have an understanding of some nuances in the language. Make sure that you're available to explain the issues to undecided and persuadable representatives. If in reaching out to members of the elected body who are undecided, based on what you and your legislative champion can determine, that you realize that one seems to oppose medical aid in dying, don't badger them. Just be respectful of their position and clear up any misinformation if they'll hear you out. If they ask about your strategy, refer them to your champion. If they're supportive, make sure to solidify that support by educating them further on the issue. You do not need to meet with members of the body who are in strong opposition, as you may antagonize them, could potentially be alerting them to your strategy, and will waste your limited resources. Be respectful towards opponents to keep them from becoming vocal or active in defeating the bill. If you don't have enough support to pass a resolution, you may be able to present the issue without having a vote, but this is a decision you should make in partnership with both your champion and your Compassion and Choices campaign manager. If you do have the votes and decide to move forward, you will likely have a public hearing. Here are some important tips for planning a successful public hearing. First, find others who are willing to join your cause. Identify supportive individuals and organizations with a strong voice in the community. The more people who are present and testify in support of a resolution, the more likely it will pass. Second, seek out opinion leaders with a stake in this issue to provide testimony. These should include doctors, faith leaders, and hospice nurses who are in favor of this end-of-life option. Third, provide talking points to all of your speakers, including supportive members of the body. Your campaign manager can provide you with updated talking points. Fourth, make sure your speakers know when and where the hearing is, and fifth, make sure they know the rules of the hearing. Most will have a limit on how long testimony can run, and it's often just a few minutes. Keep all your speakers under that time limit. It's really important to make sure the elected officials who will be voting on your resolution hear from their constituents. Make sure all your supporters contact the committee members to urge them to vote in favor of the declaration, proclamation, or resolution. Your Compassion and Choices campaign manager can share sample language with you. Keep in mind that phone calls, letters, emails, and visits that are respectful, brief, and personal are more likely to be considered and taken seriously. In your efforts to get a local proclamation passed, you will likely come across a variety of different people with diverse perspectives, interests, and concerns. What you discuss with your elected officials may be completely different from the conversation you have with a faith leader or a person with a disability, a physician, or even one of our supporters. We'll spend the next few minutes going over some facts and language you can use to support these distinct types of conversations. All of this is in the handbook for you to read through and learn so you can speak knowledgeably and effectively. Let's start with the most basic overview of the issue, our elevator pitch. Medical aid in dying allows terminally ill, mentally capable adults with 6 months or less to live to request a doctor's prescription for medication they could decide to take in their final weeks or days to end unbearable suffering and die peacefully. When a dying person only has months, weeks, or days to live, and there is nothing else that medicine can treat, we should honor and respect that person's decision to escape their pain. If you're speaking with a member of the medical community, or somebody who has concerns about support from the medical community, emphasize these 3 points. First, many leading national professional medical associations support authorizing medical aid in dying because it empowers physicians to respect their patients' wishes. Second, the American Public Health Association, the American College of Legal Medicine, the American Medical Women's Association, and the American Medical Student Association all support a dying person's access to medical aid in dying. And third, a highly reliable Medscape poll of U.S. physicians in December 2016 found that a majority, 57% of doctors, now support authorizing medical aid in dying. Medical aid in dying is not suicide or assisted suicide. Dying people who consider using medical aid in dying find the suggestion that they are committing suicide deeply offensive, stigmatizing, and inaccurate. Many have publicly expressed that the term is hurtful and derogatory to them and their loved ones. Many medical groups agree and have adopted the more accurate and neutral term medical aid in dying. In fact, the specific statutes authorizing medical aid in dying in the District of Columbia, California, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington stipulate that, quote, actions taken in accordance with the Act shall not for any purpose constitute suicide, assisted suicide, mercy killing, or homicide, end quote. Notable religious leaders have spoken out in favor of authorizing medical aid in dying. Their advocacy demonstrates that their support for patients' ability to access medical aid in dying is rooted in their faith, not in spite of it. Archbishop Desmond Tutu expounded, quote, I have been fortunate to spend my life working for dignity for the living. Now I wish to apply my mind to the issue of dignity for the dying. I revere the sanctity of life, but not at any cost. People should die a decent death. For me, that means having had the conversations with those I have crossed with in life and being at peace. It means being able to say goodbye to loved ones, if possible, at home. End quote. Medical aid in dying is a safe and trusted medical practice. A report published in the Journal of Medical Ethics about the Oregon Death with Dignity Act concluded that the practice has not resulted in any heightened risk for the physically disabled or chronically ill. In fact, there has not been a single documented case of abuse or misuse related to existing medical aid in dying laws, and no one has ever been charged with a crime. Since the implementation of the law in 1997, the Oregon Health Authority has collected data about the implementation of the Death with Dignity Act and has posted their annual reports online. Many prominent people with disabilities support medical aid in dying. Stephen Hawking summarized it succinctly in a BBC interview when he said, "We should not take away the freedom of the individual to choose to die. I believe one should have control of one's life, including its ending." Now that we've talked about how to pass a local resolution in more detail, take some time to read through Chapter 4, titled Passing a Local Resolution, which again you can find in the larger Volunteer Action Network Toolkit, a guide to volunteer advocacy, located on Compassion and Choice's Volunteer Resource Center webpage at www.compassionandchoices.org/volunteer-resource-center. To review and print our most up-to-date fact sheets, visit www.compassionandchoices.org/medical-aid-in-dying. And thank you for participating in this Volunteer Action Network training. We are so excited to work with you to improve care and expand end-of-life options in your community.